this what you really want? Turn me up, Ali.
I know your image of me.
Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Stan. I'm back again to talk about some more Magic the Gathering old school killer decks. This time I'm going to be talking about one of the top 10 most dominating decks of the old school. Today I'm going to be talking about the Big Beef Land Destruction deck. This was a Type 1/Classic deck that showed up around 94 to about spring of 95. Now, the one thing I want to tell you about the Big Beef Land Destruction deck is that it was crude, it was rude, and it was downright mean back in the day. This deck was like one of the first decks that managed to kick major ass in the tournament scene back in the day, which is why it is in the top 10 most dominating decks of the old school. Here, take a look at the recipe. Now, as you can tell, the overall strategy to this deck is basically you start out by axing a couple of lands and then putting out really big creatures. Now, when it came to defense, you axe some more lands and then you put out an even bigger creature, you know, like this monster. Also, as you can tell from the recipe, you didn't really have that much resources in the way of lands. Because if you look at the artifacts, you pretty much had like one of every Mox, a Soul Ring, and a Lotus. Back in the early days of Magic the Gathering, they were a lot easier to get your hands on and didn't cost that much. With all those Moxes, a first or second turn Juggernaut or Juzam Jin was not very uncommon. And once you had enough mana, it was only a matter of time before you dropped the Demonic Hordes with an Instill Energy and you beat your opponent in two ways. Because Demonic Hordes are basically 5/5, and the Demonic Hordes have the ability to destroy one land by just simply tapping them. Like I mentioned earlier, once you had that Instill Energy on them, you could at least get rid of two of your opponent's lands in one turn. Now, this strategy right here helped you clear your opponent's real estate. And if your opponent was playing with a slow deck, this pretty much spelled doom with a capital F-U-C-K-Y-O-U. During the early days, a lot of people weren't playing Swords to Plowshares, and actually a lot of people weren't playing with white cards all that much because they saw white cards as weak cards. A lot of players out there didn't have a full set of Moxes, which made the land kill strategy with this deck even more effective. In my humble opinion, I believe that the land kill strategy, one of the first universally accepted tournament strategies ever created. I will admit it's not a very refined deck, but with what it has, it does pretty damn well. And before focused land kill decks actually hit the scene, a lot of players just came up with the best deck that they could come up with the cards they own. But this deck right here made a lot of players realize that a well-planned theme could help you win big in a tournament. If I knew the person who made this, I would love to just tell him, it's like, dude, do you realize that you are the fucking forerunner for land kill? Which is another reason why this is in the top 10 most dominating decks. Talking about the weaknesses of this deck, I have to say probably the weakness of a land destruction deck would probably be a control deck. But that goes without saying. A well-designed control deck can be a pain in anyone's ass. Another weakness for this deck in particular is, if you notice from the recipe, it has a lot of artifacts. If you're playing with someone who has an anti-artifact deck, or if they have some sort of like artifact destruction spells or whatever in their sideboard, that could slow you down. The Juggernaut is nasty, but it can still be shattered. Let's say that you're, at this particular point in time, you're a little bit mana screwed. And a lot of your sources for mana is coming from the Moxes and everything. A Shatterstorm could fuck them up too. Alright, that's all I gotta talk about for this deck. This is the Big Beef Land Destruction deck, and this was number 10 in the most dominating decks of the old school. Really good deck, crude, but it did its job and it did it well. For its time, anyway. Alright, I'm Stan, and that's all for now.